Welcome to the Connection Matters podcast. I'm your host, Leona Johnson. In this podcast, we explore the intricate weave of consciousness, empowerment, connection to the sacred, and cultural emergence. I believe that now, more than ever, we're being called to craft a new story, one of community, deep listening, creative potential, cultural repair, and an embodied understanding of the interconnected web of all things. Let's do the work together so that we can move forwards with authenticity and integrity, knowing that we're contributing to a healthy, regenerative culture for future generations. My mission with this podcast is to inspire and empower you to step into this vision for life. Each episode, I'll bring you thought-provoking conversations with leading voices in the field, but you'll also find solo episodes where I dive deep into my passion, connected self-leadership and everyday spirituality, giving you actionable tools to integrate into your daily life. Subscribe now on your favourite podcast platform if you haven't already, and if you enjoy the show, please share it with those who would appreciate it. It really helps when you do. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help others find us who might need that dose of hope and inspiration. Finally, to get notified straight into your inbox, feel free to sign up to the mailing list in the show notes below. This is also where I share weekly inspirational thoughts and any downloadable freebies that I talk about during the episode. My aim is to serve. I am so grateful that you are here. Hey, and welcome everyone to Connection Matters. Today I am delighted to be joined by Aidan Young. Some of you might recognise the name Young because I've interviewed Jon Young twice on this podcast before, and Jon Young's work has had a profound influence on the world of nature connection and that movement of the 8 shields. Some of you might know his book, The Coyote's Guide to Wilderness Awareness and What the Robin Knows and others. But today's conversation is with Aidan. And so thank you for joining us, Aidan. Aidan, I know, is a musician, a mentor, a naturalist, a guide who has spent more than 2 decades weaving together creativity and music and mentoring and deep nature connection. And he's helped nurture musicians, mentored young people and adults through the Kamana naturalist training program and art of mentoring, and contributed to what's called the 512 project, and now helps people to discover their own creative path through music and personal mentoring. And in a few weeks, we will both be gathering at the Nature Culture Camp in here in the UK. So this feels like a really perfect time to be having a conversation and to meet you at another level, Aidan. We've probably been on some of the same calls before, but it's nice to have you here and have a personal connection. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I thought that I would start with inviting you to bring in some gratitude, to bring our hearts and minds together. So really, it's one of our core principles. It'd be really nice if you're open to sharing some gratitude.
Absolutely. Yeah. This morning I was sitting in a conservatory here in the southwest of Cornwall near Helston. And there was a red admiral butterfly that had gotten into the conservatory. And we've been seeing over the past week or so that insects have been getting trapped in the glass and overheating. So I saw the little butterfly and really didn't want it to get trapped inside there, and managed to get it to come and land on my finger and then walk it outside. And then we had a moment together where it just didn't really want to leave. And so I was sitting there just looking at this beautiful red admiral sitting right there on my hand. And it was doing that thing where they're tasting you with their proboscis and just kind of sitting there, really lovely. And then I had the thought, I could take a little video of this and share it with my family. And that was the moment that it flew away. So I'm really grateful for that red admiral and for sharing that moment. And just there's been a lot of butterflies around this week here, and I've really been enjoying them. So yeah, gratitude for the butterflies.
Yes, amazing. I've been connecting with butterflies as well this week. Actually, we've been in the woods. We've been doing a butterfly survey and feeding into the national butterfly survey that's going on, taking account of who's where and what the situation is. But it's meant lots of dancing around the woods and watching the different types. And actually, I feel like I've seen so many more butterflies this year than I have in previous years generally. So welcoming that share. Thank you. So when you look at your life, Aidan, growing up in a family, I guess, who have been in and around nature quite a lot, I'd love to know what are some of the moments that really shaped the person that you've become today?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey because I think it's instructive to maybe some of the considerations we all have in our own day-to-day journeys right now. And, I was born the same year that my dad founded Wilderness Awareness School with Ingwe back in New Jersey. So I was born in 1983 into this burgeoning vision of a nature school. And he was at that time working with primarily homeschooled children. And so some of the earliest pictures of me are snow camping in the Pine Barrens, for instance, so they're really, I really quite literally have been doing this since birth, and was unschooled, which is a particular version of homeschooling. I won't get into it, but if you're curious about unschooling, you can look that up. And what it really netted out to was this incredible free range childhood, which in and of itself was a delight. And my mother was fully on board as well. She's an avid gardener and just loves nature. So we were always out there doing one thing or another outside. And but on top of that, my dad and Ingwe were in the process of really putting into practice a lot of these principles that have, formed the 8 Shields and Art of Mentoring and the 512 Project and these different cultural mentoring principles. So I was pretty literally a guinea pig for a lot of these ideas, being tested on me. And the other thing that was happening was that as a result, they were mentoring a lot of teenagers and young men and women in their late teens, early 20s, and they were all my babysitters. So, we might think of this idea of allo parenting, right? And growing up in the evolved nest, right? The Darshan Narvais evolved nest. But for me, it was just, oh, there's Dan. He's my babysitter. And there's Rob. He's my babysitter, and Dan goes on to be the founder of White Pine Programs and, this leader on bird language. And, but these were just my babysitters. And of course, my dad was using all his coyote teaching on them to get them to run these errands to then go and try to learn these different techniques with us, right? So I had this really, really wonderful childhood in that way. And just always getting the privilege of interacting with all kinds of different adults and being taken on all different adventures. And I remember it was actually the late John Gallagher shared this with me. He said, your dad told me 2 things. He said, number 1, don't talk down to him. Talk to him like he's your same age. He's like, and number 2, he loves baseball. Play baseball with him. So, so that was the thing. But that was essentially how we were treated, and my sisters as well, is that we were invited into the grown-up conversation, from the very beginning, right? It wasn't sort of kids' world and adults' world. We were allowed to, be given that respect, which was unusual, in the 80s and early 90s. And so, I remember doing, the Kamana program sort of informally, which now we would call that the Natural Mind Journey or the Natural Mind Initiation Path in today's day and age. But just hearing about it and just getting inspired to just draw pictures of every bird and every plant and every animal in my neighborhood, and it was this idea, I'm sort of this 8, 9-year-old that just thought that was how it was supposed to be. Like you're of course you're supposed to know the names of all the birds that go by. Of course, you're supposed to know the names of all the plants and what they're used for and that tree and what you can do with it. And that was just kind of the norm, got my first fire going with one match in the rain when I was 7. These sorts of like, really they feel like rites of passage now. And I look back on it, but growing up, it was just, that's just what we do. That's just what people do, and I think having the privilege of being around a lot of folks that were older than me, I think I hit a lot of those milestones, maybe younger than average. But again, I didn't really know any different. I just kind of did it. So that was my experience. And then music got added in around the age of 10, really before that, but I picked up the guitar when I was 10. And I played some piano and mandolin and lots of singing. My mother's side of the family is this big Catholic family. Everybody sings in choir. So, I mean, it's just both sides of the family. You just have singers everywhere. And, we just loved doing all of that. So just a ton of music in the family as well. But that sort of experiential mentoring idea, just really being alive in every facet of it. Like I never took a guitar lesson, but I was surrounded by all these guitar players who were like good guitar players, and they would just show me things. And whether it was nature or music, there was just sort of this expectation of like, I'm really interested in this thing. I'm like really, really genuinely curious. I really want to know the answer. And they're going to show me this answer. And then it's totally precious. Like I have to remember it because this is 1991 or 1994. There's no internet. They're going to show it to me once and I need to remember it or it's going to be gone. Like this is my one chance. Right. And there was very much a culture of that, of just sort of showing you things here and there, and then expecting that you would just know and remember whatever they showed you last time. So you were ready for the next step. Right. Which again, I think back on it, and what an incredible privilege that was to just be surrounded, whether we're talking about nature skills or we're talking about music, just surrounded by adults who were skilled at what they did, who didn't look down on me and included me. And they gave me that respect of believing it was possible to show me something that I would pick it up and be ready for more. Right. So that was, an experience I got to have again and again and again. And the other big influence through all that was Yngwie, because both of my biological grandfathers passed away by the time I was 2 years old. So I didn't have a biological grandfather, but I had Yngwie, and he, called himself the grandfather, and I remember he used to say, I have over 400 grandchildren, and they all called me grandfather, but sitting, going up to his apartment in Red Bank and walking up the stairs. And, I think my dad would tell you how many of his canes I either broke or tried to break, and because I was doing that from, as young as I could possibly be. And, but then, going up and sitting at his feet, because he, by the time I have these memories, he's in his 70s and he didn't move too much. And so he would sit in his chair and you would sit at his feet and he would just tell stories for hours and hours and hours. And I every time we were in town, we would visit him, even after we moved to the West Coast, and so I would visit with him regularly all through my teen years. And Yngwie really did the grandfather role of putting perspective on, who am I going to be in the world, right? What is it going to mean? What's my life going to be about? What do I care about? How am I going to show up, and through these stories, but also questions. But it was interesting, right? Because the grandfather can do a thing that I don't think a parent can do, because a grandfather can just tell a story and say, it's like this. And you go, oh, I guess it's like that, whereas, your parents tell you like, well, it's not like that. So, and again, I think my dad's brilliance through all of this, we talk about coyote teaching and this idea of, I think people can misconstrue it as the trickster. And it's less about the trickster. It's more about, and I see this in his style of just having the patience to recognize and be aware of where someone is, and then not fight that, but find the way to help them find their way to the next step on the path, right? So anytime I would rebel, which was very, very rarely, there was nothing to fight back against because my dad wouldn't push, So even to the point where we had conversations, we'd be like, I can feel your rebellious energy, but I'm not really sure why, because I haven't given you any rules, But meanwhile, he's having conversations with other folks that he knows I might listen to. Right. And so I'm sitting there inside of this really kind of brilliantly woven cultural basket, and getting manipulated, as it were. But, as maybe my dad would be mad if I said this, but I'm going to say it anyway. But, he used to say, what's the difference between mentoring and manipulation? And it's intent. It's like, we are manipulating these outcomes for people, but we're trying to help them find those positive paths forward. And so, so I grew up right in the midst of that. I grew up literally with Wilderness Awareness School and followed it when it went from New Jersey to Washington State, and followed it as the art of mentoring really grew up. And, they started to have these immersion programs for high school students and for college students. And I was right there, going through as a high school student. And, I was again surrounded by all these older folks that were doing the Kamana program when it came out officially in 95. Folks started doing it, and I didn't want to be left behind, and I wanted to be taken seriously. Here I am 15, and, it's just well, I'll just share this. And, anybody who happens to listen to this, and if you're one of the people that did this, I forgive you and don't feel ashamed. But, people would come up to me at workshops. We'd be traveling all over the country, and I'd be part of all these workshops, and people would come up with this like big smile and starry eyes. And, oh my God, it's just so nice to meet you. And I just want to know, what's it like to be Jon's son? And it's like, I had to answer that with a straight face. I couldn't just like vomit on their feet, so it was very nice about it, but it was really cringy, and that was sort of the space that I grew up in. And it was I was very aware of how easy it would be to sort of just be a product of nepotism. Right. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to take any free handouts. Right. I didn't want to be elevated artificially beyond my station, and so I saw these older folks doing the Kamana program. And I said, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to graduate for real, because I had done it. I'd done the work informally as a kid, but I was like, no, I'm going to prove this. Right. And so I finished the Kamana program at 16, maybe I had just turned 17. And as I was finishing it, I was also running the Kamana Student Services and actually doing correspondence instruction for all the Kamana students at the time. So that was, sort of my late teen years as I was kind of going up into adulthood. I was really heavily immersed in Kamana. And then there was an opportunity for me. I didn't really know what I wanted to do for university, right? I just didn't have a sense. And I sort of had this sense that the nature thing wasn't really, like, I wasn't going to university, wasn't going to help with the nature thing, so I got this opportunity to go and take an internship at the Rikers Center in Menlo Park, California, but down in the Bay Area. And Rikers at the time, my dad was helping them start their nature program. And I had gone down there with him a handful of times and just kind of assisted on some of the weekend workshops we had done there. And he basically was, trying to build up that community so they could have a nature awareness department as well. And so I loved baseball. I wouldn't say I was good at baseball, but I loved it. And I really enjoyed athletics. And I loved music. I'd been playing all through my teen years. And then I had this nature background. And that was what the Rikers Center was doing. It was basically mentoring people to get better, but it was through the arts, including, mainly music, actually. It was music and film and art. And then nature and athletic fitness. And so I was, when I got offered the internship, I went, yes, please, And one thing led to another there. I mean, just through a bunch of fortunate things, I was actually the director of the music program by the time I was 21, and then the director of the whole creative arts department by 22. And just, it basically grew up in the organization, right? And sort of showed myself to have the leadership and alignment with those values, because even though it was I wouldn't consider Rikers to be a stereotypical like nature connection school. When you think of that, it had a nature connection program, but it had everything that you experience at the art of mentoring that those, including the values, right? I saw versions of that happening at the center as well. And it's actually, and I'm going to pass it back to you in a second here, but I want to pause at that moment because I think it was really important for me to end up there because of that thing that Ingwe used to say to me all the time and said to all of us, which is that we need to learn to live fully in two worlds, right? There's this nostalgia that we carry. And I mean, and believe me, it would be beautiful. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could just, as Tom Brown used to say, what if you could just strip off your clothes and walk into the wilderness and say, Mama, take me, right? Like, and there's a romance to that I think a lot of us really feel. And you get out in nature and you're like, man, no one's giving me a hard time out here. I don't have to worry about how to make rent, etc. But that's not what's being asked of us in this generation. That's not what I believe, because we have an opportunity to keep these principles alive and bring them and integrate them into our modern way of life and have it be that it isn't this dichotomy. Like, what if there was an integration that could happen, right? Like, that to me is really inspiring and has always been a thing that was inspiring. And so I always think back to Ingwe's words, because what does he mean by living fully in two worlds, right? This isn't an escapism thing. He is really talking about the weaving together, right? So I think the Reicha Center was the beginning of me seeing that possibility, because I'd seen these principles in one context within nature, but I actually believe they're more universal than that, and really can show up anywhere, right? So, but that was me, 21, 22. That's where I ended up, and spent a decade and a half exploring that journey. But I'll pause now because I said a lot.
No, thank you. That's great. It's really interesting to sort of experience your perspective on what it meant to grow up in a village, really, to grow up at least within families who understood what it is they were trying to create, whether they did it perfectly or not, because we're living in an imperfect world in challenging times. But to have that experience of firstly, the principles of connectedness and connection at home, with parents who sing and value being outside, being in nature, but more than that, that sense of being around others who are living into their curiosity, and that play and that exploring the world, and the mentorship that comes from that, with the intergenerational connection. And then to have at your disposal some of the, some really intentional elders who aren't just olders, people who understand the power of connection and storytelling, and passing on what they've gathered and known from their great experience. It's a version of life that so many people don't even get a taste of, don't even get to understand. And I'm curious, in that journey, if there was a point at which you understood that what you had experienced was actually quite different to what so many people ever get to experience.
Yeah, it's funny because, what was it, 95, 96, 97, something like that. So I'm 11, 12, 13 years old. And the art of mentoring type workshops start to happen. And then I'm just going along with my dad and traveling to them. I think I was on my first acorn when I was 13, but he's sitting up there lecturing for the entire class, telling my story, right? Because I am the guinea pig of this work. And so it's like, so it's a really strange, like, it's a strange thing to be the one in the fishbowl, but also be the one above the fishbowl, watching the fishbowl as it's happening, in a strange way. I mean, I don't think this is true anymore, but I think when I was a teenager, I may have been sort of the only one like me at that time. And I think, thankfully, because of all that amazing work that was happening back then, I think there's probably a lot of people who are entering adulthood now who can look back and have a similar perspective, right? Where they can kind of look back at the principles and go, oh yeah, that happened to me, I'm very thankful to say that that's not a unique thing anymore. But yeah, at the time, it certainly was. And of course, the thing that we all look at is, we all want what we don't have. So I had plenty of wounds around, all the sort of modern modern things that I didn't have access to, and I think to some extent that informed me moving into and working in a space that wasn't nature centric, right? Where nature was part of what I was doing, but it wasn't at the center, because I, wanted to, well, it's, the journey of the prodigal son, right? You want to go off and, and maybe I suppose I've returned at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is the case, isn't it? One would hope that if we grow up with all of these opportunities to experience true mentorship, not just as a holiday club, but actually in the way that we're living and growing and understanding the world, these principles are the way everybody around us thinks and feels, then the result of that is someone who is adaptable, who feels whole in themselves, who has all of those attributes of connection, and therefore can engage with life in all its forms from that place of grounded connection, and therefore make good choices, or at least have ways to navigate that supports them to be adaptable and to see what is needed in a space, to be able to bring connected culture, whether that's in a business or a whatever it is that we create. That's the aim, isn't it? To be able to be out there in the world in this sense of otherness that is the world out there, and then the world of nature connection and people who are doing the work. But it does sometimes feel very different, and it does sometimes there's a grief attached to that. So yeah, what an interesting perspective you've grown up with. And so now, having all of that, you've been part of this creative world, music making and bringing and supporting others to do that really well. What else have you been doing in the years since?
Yeah, so the music piece was really interesting, because I think that I took my first music lesson at 18 and was sort of a little baffled by it, almost like, really, this is what we do? Like, this is supposed to be how music is learned, and fortunately, my teacher turned out to be a pretty cool guy. Shout out to John Jordan. And he helped me to figure out what I knew and what I didn't know. Because at that point, I had already been playing for 8 years and, knew quite a lot, but there was plenty I didn't know as well. And he recognized that. He was actually a really good mentor in his own way, right? And just recognizing how he could help me fill in those gaps, right? But the Riken Center, to the founder, Gary, to his credit, I think he really understood this idea of flow learning, which Coyote's Guide goes into a little bit, but just essentially, right, this idea that we start with a vision of something. I want to do this, I want to do that, and we get inspired, but then we have to get oriented and to get motivated, right? And then we don't get into real focus until all of those other things have happened. But if you look at didactic education, it's so commonly there's sort of those beginning steps are just ignored. It's basically just like, you must learn this. And then the version of sort of vision and inspiration and motivation is, you must learn this. You're going to show up every Monday. And if you don't, you're going to get bad grades and you're going to get in trouble, right? And so that's how we get taught to focus in the traditional systems. And of course, if you run into great teachers or you happen to love the subject matter, you can have a really, really great experience in that system. It doesn't have to be that, but those are the things in place. But that was so counter to my experience. And so for me as a music teacher, first, I went, well, wait a minute. I want to help inspire and motivate these students. And I'm not going to ask them to focus too much until I see the evidence, right? And so I basically, what I came up with at that time was just this idea of like, nobody is showing up being like, I really want to practice the major scale and my arpeggios, and I really want to sit there with a metronome for 20 minutes. Nobody wants to do that. They saw their favorite musician, on YouTube or right at a concert, or heard them on the radio or whatever, and they want to be the next Jimi Hendrix or the next, Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day, or pick your artist. That's who they want to be, right? I mean, the number of teenage girls that came through that wanted to be Taylor Swift. They didn't want to learn Taylor Swift songs. They wanted to be Taylor Swift, but that's cool because I can work with that. Like, I'm a fan of Taylor Swift. That woman inspired a lot of young musicians in her day, and I think she continues to do that, right? But it's like that idea of, okay, they have a vision of who they want to be. Now, how can I make that come true for them as quickly as possible so they learn from the beginning what it's like to really play music and to be a musician, and not just to sit there and practice a scale, right? So, there were students that I would have taught them 10 songs before they ever learned a scale or knew what they were playing necessarily, because I was waiting for the evidence that they were going to put in the work and be there, And so we started this whole thing where we would have recitals every month, but our recitals were full rock concerts. And the idea was, you're 10 years old, you're playing guitar for the first time, and you like Green Day. Well, you're going to show up and you're going to play your part, but you're going to be with a full band. So when you show up, there is a drummer and a bass player and a singer and the whole thing, right? Any song you want, we're going to make it happen. You show up and you play in a band. So you've been playing music for 3 months and you just played in your first concert, and it was a rock concert. It wasn't me and my teacher reciting do, re, mi, and the few parents clapping. Like, there were lights and it was a stage, the whole thing, right? And so that's what we did every month for 15 years while I was running the music department. And what happened from that was that it became very evident, because at first we just had all the music teachers learning the 15 songs every month to back everybody up. And that was a lot. It was asking a lot of us. And it's a really intense experience. I give a lot of credit to my nature, and especially tracking and bird language skills. We had, I think, talked before we hit record about how do those things link, right? And I can tell you the biggest one is that when you are in nature, or especially tracking, it's like a coyote track never looks like a coyote track. Even if you've seen a million coyote tracks, the substrate could be different that day, or the wind was just a little weird, or this coyote was just it's difficult to recognize even the most familiar patterns because they never show up the same way. But a G chord is always a G chord, right? A G note is always a G note. And so even though it might be a different instrument playing it or a different recording, it's like pitch in this sort of finite grid of 12 possible tones, and then a rhythmic grid of, eighth notes and 16th notes, et cetera. It's like there is an answer there. The answer is mathematically predictable. So when you compare that to having to, identify a Stellar's J out of the corner of your eye, you kind of go, yeah, this is doable, right? And it demands the exact same awareness of you, right? And the thing that nature has in common with music that I think is so cool is, like, if you're wrong, you're gonna be wrong. Right? Like, you might go, oh, that was a blue jay, and it's like, yeah, but it wasn't. And you go along being, you're just gonna be wrong about that. And where that really shows up is when you're actually trying to develop your survival skills or your bird language skills. Like, I had that red admiral sitting on my finger, right? That doesn't happen if your energy doesn't make it possible for that to happen, right? And all of us have that. And I'm not doing anything special, but there's an energetic that occurs there, right? That makes it safe for that being to be there. Well, music is the same way. If you don't know the song, you don't know the song, and you can't pretend like you do, right? So that's what's so beautiful about these arenas. And actually, athletic fitness is exactly the same way, right? You can either hit the ball or you can't. You can either run fast or you can't. You can lift the weight or you can't, right? And so we're in these beautiful arenas where we're coming up against reality, but then we're coming up against it within these visions, right? So we're creating this for the students month after month after month, but it was just wearing us out because 15 songs a month is, oh my gosh, that's a lot to ask. But we had these teenagers who had become more advanced students because now we've been doing it for several years. And a few of them actually came to us and said, hey, what if we helped you learn the songs? Like, we're getting pretty good now, and that might be kind of cool. And we were like, yeah, let's try it, right? And in that moment, I recognized that there was an acorn thing happening. And so I started to integrate these Acorn principles in and started to build these students around, okay, not only are you going to help learn the songs, but now some of you are going to be responsible for welcoming people in, and somebody's going to be responsible for sound, and someone's going to be responsible. You know, we had all these different roles that they would play. And, you know, these kind of usually about 15, age 15 is when it would start. And what was really amazing, which I should have known, but of course it was a new arena, so I didn't see it right away, but I should have seen it, but I figured it out pretty quickly, was that it was making the teenagers much better at music than they would have been otherwise, because all of a sudden we were asking them to show up and be able to nail a song on stage with no rehearsal, because that's it. You got one rehearsal at 5:30 and then we played at 7. So you better show up ready to gig, like a real gig. And it was one of those things, again, all the teachers, we didn't really think about it, but then we started to realize it. We basically were giving them real professional gig training. So they were getting like professional musician experience as a 15-year-old every month, right? A bunch of these kids went off to music school and just killed it. I mean, they just did so awesome because they had all this real life experience from being part of it, right? But we basically built like a music village, right? What would it be like and this was all rock music, right? There's, it wasn't, I mean, I love folk music and all that stuff, but we're talking Green Day and Metallica and, Taylor Swift, sure. Yeah, anything they wanted. If we could pull it off, we could pull it off. We had a hip hop department. So we were doing rap songs live too. I mean, it was just everything. So, but the principles that I saw in the Acorn based around nature worked exactly the same in this space, right? And the difference is nature is inherently inspirational. It's inherently connective, and it is alive, right? There's an amazing David Abram quote. He says, we are human only in connection and conviviality with that which is not human. Right. And so it's like going out and being in this world of living unpredictable patterns and beings and entities that, it's inherently inspiring in a way that human built things can fail to be. Right. But you think about music and it's like music is in its own way like the closest thing we have that we create in quotes, but is its own sort of living phenomenon, right? Because it's not alive, I suppose, but boy, it moves us in a way that, and the ancient Greeks said that astronomy and music were like sister disciplines, because astronomy was the study of external movable, observable bodies, right? The relationships between them. But music was the study of the relationships between internal, invisible elements and how to move them, right? This idea that music is, you can make someone cry at the right time in the movie, and it's the music that's going to do it. And you could change the music and you could make them afraid, or you could make them hopeful, or you could make them angry, right? It's the music that's doing it. Like there is something there, right? There's something there in alive. So for me, music was really, really a powerful way to go through this. And I think there's this really beautiful relationship sort of between music and nature, right? Because of that sort of magic quality to it. But yeah, it was building that village around it. And I was just so inspired to see what could emerge from, surly teenagers that want to be rock musicians, right? I mean, I think there's this thing, right? We think about nature, we sort of think about people who have maybe a little bit more of a higher minded, perspective already, but you don't necessarily think about that as a musician, no, I just want to, wear black and rock out, but the attributes of connection, right? The leadership principles would emerge over time as they got this opportunity to essentially experience what I was lucky enough to experience, right? To really be put in leadership positions, to be respected, and to be given responsibility to do that for others, right? That was the brilliant thing. And I know I just don't want to leave it unsaid because I think it's so important. Gary Rikis was brilliant at this. And if all of us put this into our processes, I think everything would get better. The moment you knew how to do something and you had a skill that you could celebrate, he would pump you up. And then the next sentence would basically be, okay, what can you do to help somebody else? Like, and not even what can you do, but go help someone else. And he like made this through line experientially, that it was like, you had that proud moment, and immediately that pride and self, reflection, it was immediately channeled into helping others. And like that idea, you would end up embodying this. I mean, it's connection, isn't it? It's this idea that I have people who are available to me that are going to feed into me and help me grow. And I am responsible responsible is not even the right word. I am capable of repeating that and helping others, and how good that feels too, right? Because I think we all think that what we want is that moment of, look how great I am. And maybe when you're 17, you could do that a few hundred times and still be pretty happy with it. But by the time you're 25, it's hollow, right? And you're looking for that next thing. So what if you already have the muscle memory of it before you even realize it's something you're looking for, right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's so much in that. And I can just imagine the team that you were part of, both from, you're the leader there of that place, but also the team that you worked with, and then to see and be part of that group of musicians who were there every month, evolving this skill, and then feeling the benefit, even if you weren't aware of how profound it was what you were doing until maybe sometime down the line, but just being in that energy, and really with all of those principles of storytelling, inspiration, inspiring, bringing in, why would I ever even want to do this? Because that has to come intrinsically, doesn't it? Before people can become great just by working hard at something, but that's a different thing to it just being the way we live, and the way that we live being in reverence to life, allowing our inherent creativity to flow through us, because we have the skills to be able to do that, and then to do that for and with others. So much richness in that story. Thank you for sharing. So I wonder, given all of that music, like, I think we were saying before, being a musician doesn't inherently make you a connected person. Being someone who spends a lot of time in nature doesn't inherently make you a connected person. So what is it? What are the elements that make us connected? How do we bring those invisible qualities or skills or ways of being into our way of being, so that we get to swim in that pond as well as help others to swim in that pond of connectedness?
Man, I mean, if I had that answer, I'd probably charge a lot. No, I'm just kidding. I think there's that idea, right, that we do a much better job of taking care of what we know, right? But when we're little, my niece is 2, and she loves bugs. She loves them. She loved the oyster catchers on the beach this week. And the oyster catchers were extraordinarily tolerant of her. They did not love being followed around by a 2-year-old, but they were extraordinarily tolerant of it too, right? And it's so interesting, right, to think that an oyster catcher clearly understands a toddler in the way that they respond. Because if one of us went after those oyster catchers, they would be gone in a second. And they would, they'd be doing their little beep, 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 the high pitched thing. I have noise cancellation on, otherwise I would do it, but then you wouldn't hear it. So anyway, but they would be yelling at us, basically. They'd be flying off right away, and they'd be kind of shaking their fist at us. Like, why did you do that? But with the 2-year-old, they let her kind of follow them around, and they just sort of keep their distance, and they don't fly, right? There's something in that. And it's a thing that we all know it's in all of us. That's the thing about connection, is that I don't think that any of us need to be taught what it is. But sometimes I think maybe we believe that we need to be taught what it is, because it's like there's this thought, I think, of it couldn't possibly be that simple, right? But it's like it's real love and presence, or if the word love is too mushy for you, wonder and real curiosity and just openness. It's like me sitting there with that butterfly, and like, until I had the silly thought about taking the photograph, it was just like, oh, look at you. You're just like, oh, like, and that is, it's like, why do we all have pets, right? So many of us have pets because and they just want to come in, they just want to cuddle on you. And you go, well, I can't possibly get up now because the cat is on me. It's like, that's connection. It's like recognizing this life and just the preciousness of just that moment and sharing that moment, right? But that doesn't pay the bills. And so our systems, and again, it's easy to go, they're evil, and sure, I'm sure there's versions of that, but I think that's almost makes it too easy. It's just that we're busy and there's a lot of practicalities, and we're all trying our best to survive within the system while also changing it. And it just doesn't value, like, even we're talking about that idea of you can become great at something by doing it again and again and again. And that's true. But our system rewards that. It rewards this sort of specialization so that you can be extracted and so you can extract value, right? And it's like that is still there all the time. And connection sort of says that's not what's important. And we all know that that's not what's important. And so to me, I keep coming back to living fully in two worlds, because I have this belief, this may feel like a tangent, but I swear it's related. They did all those studies on 4-day work weeks, and they found that productivity didn't really change. In fact, it went up in a lot of cases, right? And that just makes total sense, because any one of you out there sitting right now that's had a full-time job, you're mailing it in a little bit. You're just, one of your motivations is to not get in trouble. And as long as you don't get in trouble, you've done enough work that week, So of course, if we just backed it off 20%, of course you would be more productive, because you'd be like, well, I have less time. This actually counts now, right? So we're living in a lot of these systems that are just sort of, they're artifacts, right? And we know it's not important, but it's like the question that's interesting to me is like, how can we weave in these ideas of connection, of normalizing like respect and love for each other, and not mushy love, but just like real present acknowledgement of the being that's on the other side of your eyes, whatever that is, whoever that is. And like to recognize that I think we could still have a productive society, right? Like, if we don't need to run away. We could do that here. And it's much more exciting to me. Like, again, the music thing showed me, even the fitness thing showed me, it's like, yes, we need trackers for sure. And if your calling is to become a tracker or to become an ornithologist, or if you're called anything in nature, by all means, right? But also, we need like super connected, awesome electricians, especially in this day and age. We're going to need them more and more, right? Wouldn't it be great if we had connected software engineers? I know that sounds impossible, but I swear we could do that. I'm sure we could do that, right? Like, and I think that's the thing that I just want all of us to consider, is like, this work we've been doing with Connection First, that was 8 Shields before that, or 6 Shields before that, and Wilderness Awareness School, and Ingwe, and Tom Brown, and all of these amazing indigenous wisdom keepers that we've learned from over the years, that we're also fortunate to have been influenced by. Like, none of them were saying, you better get the words in the right order and it's this, and then it's north and then east. Okay, it's north and then east. Do not go, no, southwest is about the right. Like, no. Like, what everybody has been saying is that there's this beautiful tapestry of stuff that if we integrate it into our lives and we live that way, everybody does better, Like, and so if you're listening to this and you're worried that you don't quite understand the principles, yeah, don't worry about it. I never told anyone they were in East. I never used a shield in the music program. I never asked anybody to do nature connection. I never asked anybody to do, but what we did do? We did show up and we did practice gratitude and road dust in some way that would work for a group of teenagers that don't know each other. We definitely did that, and then at the end of the night, we did an appreciation circle where everybody could shout out something they appreciated about that night. Beautiful. I mean, and again, like, it's amazing to see what happens when like I'm talking about, like, a sad 15-year-old that wears that hoodie over their eyes so that they don't want to look at anybody, but then they get to sit in that circle and be safe for 3 months. And then what they share, because we have proved to them that we're listening, right? That's cool. That's connection,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? My son is age 15 now, so he's on work experience this week. And for the last couple of years, he's said he wants to be an engineer. He wants to be, initially it was a space engineer, and then now it's structural engineering. And I always thought he's been like you since he was a toddler. I was a forest school leader, and I had learnt the 8 shields by the time he was 2 years old, and got involved, and we were running our business with the principles of the 8 shields. Gratitude was a big part of our practice, connecting, sensory awareness, all of that was just the way he lived. We sing, his dad's a music teacher. And when we're in nature, when we would go for walks, he would just be off. Like, as soon as we were out, he was off in the wilds, kind of following along near us, but in the bushes. And he was just so at home in that space. He was gone, so present with what's going on. And it felt to me like there was only one way he was going. He was going to be a nature connector or a geographer or somebody who worked with people to bring out their inherent nature connection, but he's never shown any interest in it. Of course, he's 15, and of course, as you said, that's not what it's about. I know that one of the questions he asked the mentors that he's in this really cool structural engineering company who have done some really big, massive projects across the world, and I've been kind of subtly going, so what about ethical and environmental sustainability? But before I even said anything to him yesterday, he was telling me about it, that he'd asked about their ethics and how they make decisions about and that they'd already calculated their full carbon profile since the 20 years since they've been running, and that's always a big part of their. And so for him, it's inherent. It's just what he knows, to be conscious, to be connected, to understand and appreciate the kind of mentoring he's receiving this week, because of the time that they're taking and the gratitude that he wants to give them by the end of the week, because of how much care he's been shown. And it, it's a proud mum moment, but I know that he is the way he is because of all the ways that he's been able to experience other great adults mentoring him and make good choices. And he's going to go on out into the world, as hopefully many of our children will, and do great things. I don't mean great in that sense of, whatever greatness sometimes can mean, but just things that are meaningful to him, because he's had a good opportunity to know what great feels like. To be surrounded by people who care, to be surrounded by people who make good choices about where they buy things, about what and how they live. And he's experienced what it's like to feel safe in the natural environment, and the awe and wonder that comes from that, and how powerful it is to create it. And I hope that that's what we get to do through just existing in our spheres of influence. And yet we're living in challenging times. I wonder, connection. What is connection? Connection is feeling safe enough to be present in our skin, is being surrounded by others who also have the intention of holding that space and feeling that themselves, and maybe who are also have a sense of the inner and the outer connection, taking the time and the space. And that's one thing that the busyness of our culture doesn't often allow, is the space and the time. But it's about prioritizing and choosing. And what you said at the beginning about intention, holding the intention for that to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's two things you said in there that I want to reflect on. One is that safety you're talking about, and for all of us to recognize that at some point we get the opportunity, if we're lucky enough to have experienced those safe containers with others, we get the opportunity to then be someone who chooses to create it for others. And it's a scary threshold, especially when we're coming from a place where maybe we don't have a lot of it in our day-to-day. And then we go and we get to experience it, maybe at nature culture camp, right? Or wherever it is that it happens. But that opportunity is available, right? And it's going to be through, little by little, people making that choice to go back to wherever they go after they get to have this connective experience, and then choosing to create just the smallest version of it, which could just be yourself at first, or maybe just one other person. And people practicing it. I'm not ready to be someone who's going to create safety and connection for others on my own, but I could do it with a buddy, right? I think that's the first thing I want to just say, is like, that's so powerful in any form. That's so powerful. 5 minutes in a week, that would be amazing if it's not happening for 5 minutes, right? And I think that's that other piece that I look at, is it's like, again, there are all of these beautiful tools that are available to us to create connection and practice connection. But ultimately, it just comes down to just being present with one another, with other people, with ourselves, with the natural world, or with music, and just doing it in a way that is present and kind. And it's leave it better than you found it, but that's both ways. It's like, you pick up the trash on the ground and you've left that place better, but you also are leaving better for having been that person and made that choice, and every little version of that is really powerful and meaningful. And yeah, again, let's have structural engineers that feel that way too, right? That would that's awesome. I mean, and we all know it. We've all been in the grocery store and had an interaction with a clerk who was really kind, and you walk out being like, oh, that was my day's a little brighter now, I've just gone shopping, and like, this stuff matters, at every level, every level. So
yeah, it does, and I guess we when we allow ourselves to see that in practice, we feel that we're in it more. And something that our media and life, if you look at politics or anything in the news, would tell you, is that everything isn't great in the world. But actually, that it's about allowing ourselves to see the beauty, to see the wonder, to see the kindness everywhere and where it is, that will fill us up and help us to be that in ourselves. Which is one of the reasons that I love the Nature Culture Camp, which you named before. So for people who don't know about the Nature Culture Camp in the UK, it is on the 5th to the 11th of August this year at the Clophill Centre in Bedfordshire, which is an evolution of what used to be called the Art of Mentoring camps, which was a space where people went to experience what it's like to live in a temporary connected culture, something that Aidan said he experienced from a young age, and was immersed within these camps. And the nature culture, I wasn't at it last year, but I was one of the facilitators of the guilds the year before, and have done quite a lot of these camps over the years. And it's a very special and unique thing to be able to be in a space with people for a whole week and eat together and get up together and greet the day and be in circle and have people of all ages, from babes in arms to people who are elders, and running around doing meaningful work, learning together, playing together, making music together, and really tending to the group in a way that is very unique and special and inspiring. And yes, there is a grief whenever we go out into the world, and that sometimes it isn't what we experience in our everyday. But in my experience through attending these camps, well, firstly, I always get there and think, why didn't I work harder to get everyone I know here? Because it's just such in a way, it's a surprising experience of belonging, because from the moment that you arrive, everything about it is created with those, 10 stones of what we call the 10 stones of connection, the ways of being that enable us to feel, for our nervous systems to settle, to know that we're welcome, to have spaces to be able to offload our road dust, as we call it, the challenges of arriving. But at the same time, there's nothing that isn't normal, isn't welcomed in our nervous system. Just joy and also grief tending. Literal. We have literal grief tending ceremonies and things. So I'm really excited to be going again. Excited that you're going to be there, Aidan. You've done plenty of camps in your time, I'm sure. What are you looking forward to about joining this camp?
Well, I think you just described it so well. Just this opportunity to sink in with people and to be, fully immersed in that connective experience together for a short period. And I think for me, especially, a lot of the work we're doing at Connection First has been online. And so I've met and interacted with so many folks that I'm just going to be able to sit in the same space as, and that's very exciting. I think a lot can be done online, and I'm really grateful for it. And at the same time, there's really just nothing like getting to, turn off everything else for a few days and be together. So really looking forward to that. Just to sink in with everyone and experience that. And I understand. So there's still space available, right? Anyone who hears this conversation is inspired. And I will second the sentiment that every time I go to something like this, I'm always coming away going like, oh my gosh, that was just the best thing. Like, of course, I want everybody to go and experience that with me, because I just had the best time. There was I think it was at one of the UK Art of Mentorings maybe 10 years ago that Will Weir said to my dad, why do you do this for 7 days and then not this for 356 instead of we should be doing this for 356. And so I think I will say, just, talking about the work we're doing at Connection First right now, I think that's essentially the question we're trying to answer. And we have a nature connection, an online nature connection membership. And we also have, we've started up people connection through village building. And we have some different audio programs and things. But one of the challenges that we've seen over the years is that you go to some transformational experience like this, you have this amazing week, and then you go back home and it's like even harder, because you're like, oh man, this is, not only am I not with all these wonderful people in this experience now, but now I like have this new awareness of how far my day to day is from where I wish it was. And that's the work we all have to do, right? Is to little by little make that a reality, that we are 365 days in connection, right? That's the work that can be done. And I think that I've been back with Connection First since the beginning of 2004. And I have been incredibly heartened by the potential for connection and consistent positive outcomes for folks in an online venue. And I think there's just something about it that it will never go as deep as when you get to spend a week alone. That's, they're actually really complementary with each other, but it also allows you to start to normalize sort of the Monday of it all. It's like, yeah, on Monday I do nature connection too. And I have my job, or I have my, I'm getting my kids to school or whatever that is, but that it actually is normal and integrated. And I think having these regular touch points in a community of practice like that just really works wonders for helping us to normalize that, yeah, we can do little meaningful things in our lives, and slowly but surely we can shift the focus. So if that's interesting to any of you, we'll put a bunch of different things, but there's people connection stuff, there's nature connection stuff, there's some amazing audio series. Tracking Our Roots in Nature is a really, really cool audio series if you like that. And then the 512 Project videos. I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole. There's 64 of them. You can go ahead and get all 64 if you're ready, but you can also you can watch we have a free one you can watch and see if you like the idea. But it's really getting in depth into all of these different sort of cultural elements, we call them, but they're really principles for how people effectively connect with one another, and what a healthy culture could look like, and my dad did this series in 2016 through 2018. We went to 8 different organizations, and we spent a weekend with each of them sharing these principles in an audience that was really prepared and primed to listen to these ideas. And he had been visiting the San Bushmen in the Kalahari on a regular basis. And so he grounds a lot of these ideas in how he observed it directly in his time with them, as well as then telling other stories in other places it happened. So that's another really fascinating resource. Anyway, we have lots of things. I'll give you a link, in the show notes, and so you can find it. But that's what I've been excited to be a part of. I've done a fair bit of the village building stuff just because there was a need there for someone else to kind of step in and help out. But it's funny because I'm this music guy and this mentor and all this. That's all true, but I'm also I was the operations director for the last 5 years that I was at the Rika Center. So I'm kind of in operations and finance and administration right now is one of my roles as well. But as you can see, I'm definitely fully on board with the subject matter, so to speak. So.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And absolutely, we can't do all of it all of the time, but it's great to know that these resources are there, and that we learn something, we get inspired, we learn something, we embody it, we evolve it, we feel the need for a little bit more. And each time I go back into the 8 Shields, I was lucky enough to be invited to be on the 2 Arrows pathway in a few months ago. And wow, that was this was something, an online process that that Jon and Randy and a whole bunch of people came together and created to explore what's the next step for this movement? How do we actually how do we use the tools that are there and take what we already know is needed in the world and expand it in a way that is going to be reaching not just the hundreds of people that we get to reach, but the thousands and the millions? And really, what an amazing kind of field to be existing in. People who are holding such questions, really opening to the possibility that in our lifetimes, maybe we'll get to experience the knowing that what we do today, well, I guess we can experience the knowing that what we do today will create ripples, but to know that we're amongst that group of others who are going to do that too, and that they will, and they will, and that hopefully our grandchildren will have a future that is much more, and our great-grandchildren, which is much more connected than what so many people get to experience today. And partly because of the care that that we are, people that we know are doing in holding these amazing teachings and ways of knowing and exploring what it is to be a fully alive human being on this planet in these times. Yeah. So, any final words, Aidan? What's the most alive? What would be something that you would love our listeners to leave with?
I don't want to put any pressure on any of you if you're listening, but there's an invitation here. If you've heard through this conversation some way in which you could create a little bit more connection in your own life, something really simple that feels like it could be a meaningful step toward that, whether it's work or family or friends or in your community somehow. But I think what I would invite you to consider is that there really isn't any reason for you to wait, and that you don't need any special information or permission. Or if you did need permission, now you have it. I am giving you permission to go out there and create a little bit of connection out there, because I think you really will leave it better than you found it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. I used to, back in the days when I was more involved with art and actually creating art on the walls, one of my pieces was practice acts of random kindness, and that starts here, and we get to do that. We get to make that choice. So yeah, thank you so much, Aidan, for this rich conversation. I'll look forward to meeting you in person in a few weeks.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to Connection Matters podcast. I hope today's episode inspired and empowered you to deepen your connection to yourself, others, and the world around you. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe, share it with those who might benefit, and leave a review. It really helps others to discover the podcast. You can also join our mailing list to stay updated with new episodes, inspiring thoughts, and free resources designed to support your journey. Together, we can build a more connected, compassionate world, one conversation at a time. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep creating the future that you want to live in. Go well, beautiful human.